We're going to move into traffic because we do have a lot to share. Ray, you should be able to share your screen if you want to sort of introduce our panel and folks from traffic, and we'll share with you guys the results from our traffic survey.
I'm here.
Hi, Ray.
Hello. It's a voice from, well, depending upon your perspective or point of view, from above or from the nether world below. I'm sure some folks do think I'm from the below, but beyond that, welcome, welcome, welcome. First of all, I'd like to welcome our invited officials, both elected and appointed. I see State Representative Pam DeLizio. Thank you so much for being here. State Representative Darisha Parker. Thank you so much, Representative Parker. Mr. Mark Washington from the Streets Department. Thank you. Mr. David D., also from the Streets Department, who is our regional traffic engineer. And Mark, Mr. Washington, I believe you're Assistant Chief Traffic Engineer for the city?
That is correct. I'm the Assistant Chief Traffic Engineer for the Philadelphia Streets Department.
Okay, I'm glad.
And I was the former traffic engineer for East Falls, 15 years ago. So,
okay, under Mr. Denny.
Yes.
Okay, and Ms. Samantha Williams from Councilman Jones' office. Thank you, Ms. Williams, for attending this important meeting. Myself, Meg Greenfield, Henry Donner. Let's see who else I can find. Dr. Alan Schindler. Let's see, Meg, am I missing anybody else? I think these are our present members of East Falls Community Council Traffic Committee. So I did not mention, they're not here, but Ellen Kennedy, Jean Bowles, thank you to Deborah Feldman, Mr. Michael Markovitz, as well as Bill Epstein. I don't think he's here either. All right, folks, let's get to the meat of the matter. And I think we all know why we're here. And Emily, I'm going to try to screen share on your platform, if that's the right word. So please bear with me for a moment. Does everybody kind of see this? Have I made a successful share?
Yes, you have. That looks great.
Yes, you have.
Okay.
And you have it nice and maximized. It's wonderful.
Not bad for an old head. Okay, look, we're here for very important reasons, all kidding aside. Events of recent weeks really underscored the problem and the terrible frequency of collisions among vehicles and between vehicles and pedestrians. As documented here, a young man who was struck down by a hit-and-run driver in the early morning hours in April. At that time, he was in a coma, and as of May 7th, his mother was still pleading for the perpetrator to come forward. We had 4 fatalities between April 18th and May 19th, including 3 teenagers killed in a car accident on Kelly Drive between the cemetery and North Ferry Road, and a young man illegally operating a dirt bike on Henry Avenue. And as if to underscore the frequency of these events, April 18th and 19th, in about an 18-hour period, remarkable set of events, including the one I just mentioned, the young man being killed on a dirt bike at the intersection of Henry and Roberts. That was at 5 p.m. I'm sorry, 1 o'clock at Fox and Queen, a remarkable collision which sent an automobile careening across sidewalks. And according to the neighbor that I interviewed, sometime between 12 midnight and 3 a.m. on April 19th, a 2-car incident in which one vehicle left the street. As you can see, traveled along the sidewalk. This is the corner property, which, by the way, recently sold, and careened through the fence and onto the lawn of the property. Now, sadly, these are not isolated incidents. Rather, they're really like part of an historical pattern. And we can go all the way back, and we've been keeping photographic records since 2006, 2007. And one of the most remarkable was this event on Mother's Day in 2009, 3 doors up from the corner of Midvale Avenue, McMichael Street, in which a vehicle left the road and ended up on the bushes right in the front bay window of the one of the twin houses you see here, directly across the street from Michael Park. And Midvale through the years has been, a place of many, many incidents, collisions, oftentimes cars leaving the road, ending up on the sidewalk, and the corner of Fox and Midvale, and that can be attested by many people who live in the community, is particularly dangerous. Many, many accidents. In fact, 2 weeks after that, after this accident, a similar accident occurred, 2 vehicles, and this time both properties were impacted. Fox Street also has been a problem with speeding traffic towards going to and coming from the US Route 1 Roosevelt Expressway. Oftentimes, what pedestrians come across are the reminders of such accidents, broken fire hydrants, down street signs. We came upon this vehicle soon after an accident in 2006 in which the vehicle burst into flames. Most recently, as documented by neighbors Bill and Francis, a 4-car accident last Saturday on Fox Street near the intersection with Penn. 4 vehicles, and I believe one of the vehicles left the scene even before the police arrived. And of course, one of our favorite streets of all, Henry Avenue, with its usual array of collisions and incidents, is also just a marker of the frequency of these incidents day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year, including, and the police, of course, rushing to the scene end up sometimes being part of the collisions. So, as I said, none of this is happenstance or once a year or once in a decade. And they're part of a pattern of incidents at all times of the year, all kinds of weather, and usually resulting in serious injuries and sometimes fatalities, as this one very famously. And the evidence is always left as mute testimony, whether it's a smashed telephone pole, down street lights, even traffic, even historical markers are sometimes, this is after the historical marker was moved from Henry Avenue to Coulter Street. So even the Kelly House is not immune from the mayhem. And so, and unfortunately, new problems are cropping up all the time, including now, as reported to me by neighbors on and near Indian Queen Lane. Drivers of tractor trailers, for whatever reason, are electing to drive down Indian Queen Lane and move their rigs, literally drive their rigs from Henry Avenue, sometimes attempting to go in Scotts Lane. Don't ask me what happens once they reach the railroad bridge near the former East Falls Garden. But if you can see this picture posted on Facebook recently, one of those rigs, right before reaching Ridge Avenue, smashed into a car. So all of this just serves as visual evidence to what people have been talking about for many years. So recently, the Traffic Committee and the Executive Committee of East Falls Community Council elected to conduct a survey. And this survey was conducted among residents of East Falls online via SurveyMonkey, and in person at polling places on our most recent election day in May, and also among recipients of street trees because they represent a broad cross-section of the community from all ends of East Falls. Now I have a separate presentation for that, so hold on to your horses while I stop the share on this one, and let's see if I can success. Yes, here we go. Whoops, did I share that? No, probably not. So I'll share my screen and whoops, go back. Come on. Oh, where is it?
And while Ray is doing that, just kind of a reminder to folks that if you want to, if you have any questions as he's talking, just go ahead and put them into the chat, and then once we've kind of done this introductory period, then we'll start to address questions.
Just give me a moment, folks. I knew it was there. Okay, let's go. Oh boy, let's see if we can get on to, help me with this. Whoops, didn't want to do that. and do it. All right, well, try to. And do it. Here we go. I apologize, folks. All right, so here are the results of the survey. And are folks able to read the question number 1?
If you want, Ray, I can read through it kind of quickly for everyone.
Sure.
We've got numeric depictions of the responses. So first to say, 325 community members responded to the survey that we put out. I think we left it open for about a week, maybe a little bit longer. Thinking about the block where you live, nearby intersections, cross or routes that you travel, what areas are you most concerned about? And or what issues are you most concerned about? The speed vehicle traveled was sort of the number one area of concern, followed by aggressive driving, followed by safely crossing intersections. And then you can see some of the other results. And just to let you guys know, we will post these survey results somewhere on our website so that at any point folks can go look at them.
Right. I'm sorry, Emily.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if I may just chime in, yeah, this question was designed in mind with the idea of just asking respondents, for their impression of traffic and speeding problems and what impressed them the most as a safety issue. And as you stated, yes, quite correct. The speed at which vehicles travel throughout the neighborhood edged out to be number 1, but closely followed number 2 by aggressive driving. And
then just being able to safely cross intersections. And you can see the breakdown. And then if you go to the third slide, do you worry about your personal safety while walking, biking, driving in East Falls? And a little over 70% said that they did. So that's obviously something we want to address. Going down to the 7th slide, do concerns about safety as a pedestrian, cyclist, or driver factor into your thinking about visiting local parks, playgrounds, restaurants, or other businesses? And then it was split, as you can see. A little more people said no than yes, but there's also still a high percentage of folks who are making decisions about visiting businesses and parks and restaurants in East Falls because they have concerns about their safety.
Yeah, and as an example, you may want to ask someone who just, this reflects attitude as far as how they feel about walking along the streets or to a desired destination. So for example, we often walk our dog to McMichael Park, and the decision is to whether or not to cross Henry Avenue or not because of the safety issue.
And then slide 9. Are you surprised to learn that 2020 was Philadelphia's worst year for fatal car crashes in decades, up 54% from October 2019 to October 2020? And let's keep in mind that for at least half of that time period that was measured, we were in quarantine. And yet, we've had the worst year ever for traffic fatalities. And so I guess most people around East Falls know this to be the case. They were not that surprised. Close to 70% were surprised by this result.
Yeah, and if I may add, I also think that it's not surprising considering how much media play was, how much the media profiled this issue, especially in that time period. So people's awareness was raised by a number of factors and through a number of avenues.
And then slide 11, overall, how concerned are you about pedestrian and traffic safety? And over 70% of you, I think close to 75, are concerned. You guys are very concerned, and that's obviously, we can see this because that's why you're here tonight.
Right. And this was when the question appeared in the survey, it was a ranking from 0 to 100. So the survey aggregated those results so to get an overall gauge of perception of safety in East Falls. And as Emily just said, this is remarkably high.
And then slide 13, which is basically looking at, we asked everyone to rank what they thought were the most dangerous to the least dangerous streets. I don't think any of us are surprised that Henry Avenue was considered to be the most dangerous, followed by Midvale, followed very closely by Ridge, then Fox, Schoolhouse, Calumet, Merrick, and Palisades. So, I think a lot of what we might be talking about tonight has to do with Henry and Ridge and Midvale as our main intersections, but especially as Ray's slide presentation showed us, with this new thing of tractor trailers driving down Indian Queen Lane, like that's, we have concerns on our side streets as well, where your children play and your pets wander around, and you also want to be able to safely cross the street. So those are some concerns.
Yeah, and if I can just add quickly, the problems and concerns are manifested in a number of different ways. Another problem that's been that has been expressed by many residents on Indian Queen Lane in proximity to Scotts Lane and the charter school at the Falls Center is the queuing of school buses before and after school, which is creating a whole host of issues. So the problems are really all over, but of course, certain patterns of speeding and endemic traffic rule violation are mostly seen, again, Henry, Ridge, and Midvale.
Now, this question really gets to what can we do about this? And so we asked folks, do you think that driver compliance with safety rules would improve if traffic calming features were built? And over 70% of you, close to 75, said yes. And so I think those are some of the things that our traffic committee looks at, is what can we ask PennDOT and the streets department to do in our neighborhood that might actually help alleviate this. I believe somewhere in one of the survey responses I read, somebody said the real problem is just how the drivers drive, and unfortunately we're not able to force everyone to go back to driving school, so maybe there's something else we can do, like traffic calming.
Right. And I think it reflects an attitude and a belief and a hope that some authentic solutions can be implemented beyond what folks are traditionally used to in receiving, not only in East Falls, but throughout the city of Philadelphia, because evidently, casual efforts as, putting up directional signals or posting of speed signs are not really having the efficacy, both in terms of perception and I would bet my bottom in measurement of actual reduction in incidents. So I think more than anything, this does seem to convey a sense of urgency, and people want something done.
And then, this is possibly maybe partially directed to some of our guests on the call. When should public officials implement traffic calming measures on a particular block? And, I said most people think that in response to a community request, considering public safety overall was a big thing, which I think we're looking at that now with the responses to this survey and the folks that are on this call. Folks also said that if 75% or more of the residents on a block agree that something should be done, so I know that some of you live on blocks where speed cushions and other measures have been put in place. And then those are the two that I focus on, because the other two responses really didn't get as much response. But I think, unfortunately, we've had injuries and deaths in East Falls, so we've already passed that point. And at which we have to sort of take action. That's happened, and we'd like to have action happen before there's more of that.
Right, I agree with Emily, and the 75% item is that's a reflection of the current protocol in place, in which 75%, and in other words, the residents of a block or a street have to be polled, and 75% of them have to agree to the stated changes. And sometimes there's a logistical issue associated with that. In a more recent episode in which we decided to work with the block separately, the 3000 block of Queen Lane, which is experiencing also speeding issues, and to comport with recommendations from elected officials. We attempted to get 75% of the residents to respond. We were 100% successful in total response on one side, which were all private homes and all owner-occupied homes. The other side of the street, which is an apartment complex, not one person responded as of today after a 3 or 4 week effort. Mostly, a lot of the footwork was done by a resident of that block, Ms. Suzanne Penn. I'm not sure if she is here tonight or whatever.
I've got a raised hand in the chat. Meg, you have a question or a comment specific to this part of the survey?
Yes, but specific to the 75% requirement which has been imposed. And I have a fundamental problem with it because the residents are not the only people who use those blocks, and it exposes all the drivers to the knowledge or lack of knowledge or of the residents. And it seems to me that if there is a traffic safety problem, which puts all users of that road at risk, then it should not be determined by the residents of the block as to whether or not effective calming measures are put in place. That doesn't make any real sense. We don't set speed limits that way. We don't do a whole lot of other things that way. We don't decide vaccines are effective or not effective for measles, mumps, and rubella on the basis of a poll of parents and kids. We try to rely on science. And that approach of the 75% requirement does not rely on science. So I find it's fundamentally flawed, and I just wanted to say.
No, Meg, that's a great comment. What I'd like to do is really save the comments. We've only got a few more slides to share with you of the survey results, and then we will open it up, and that's the point at which we'll do all the comments. I do see 2 comments in the chat, which I'll get to just in a moment, although Nancy, I don't know if you had more that you wanted to say. I only see a few words.
Yeah, sorry, I'm redoing it. Sorry about that.
Okay, and then I will call on the folks who put some comments into the chat. David, do you mind if I call on you after we get through just a few more slides?
Yeah, well, let me just make one quick sentence. Is that the 75% isn't exactly true, and I'll get to that when you're done with the presentation.
We will. Okay, so I've already figured out that 75% is going to be a little part of our conversation tonight. The next on slide 19, or page 19, I don't know, slide 19. What is a reasonable, acceptable period of time for city or state officials, authorities, or agencies to respond when an actionable safety concern is identified? And most of you think that there should be response within a year. And so we will, I just make note of that, and probably note of that again for some of our invited guests on that call, that, you know, we don't expect things to be done tomorrow, but we do expect within a reasonable amount of time that when these concerns are raised, and I think a lot of what we're going to talk about tonight are concerns that have been raised with folks for a while now.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, if I can add on to that, Emily, you know, in a recent conversation you and I had, for whatever reason, why? Because I'm the chair of the traffic committee, better or for worse, I receive a lot of emails from folks throughout the community, and one of the big complaints is the time factor. In other words, they're saying that the city does not respond in a reasonable amount of time. Weeks go by, months go by, years go by, and this is a repeated statement, a repeated frustration. So again, here you have in front of you some data which does seem to speak, which in fact does speak to to what people are feeling about this. And so it certainly would seem to me, as well as any dispassionate or unbiased person looking at this, government response needs to be speeded up and in the interest of saving lives.
And the last slide results, that the question result that we'll share with you, has to do with something that I'm sure you have all experienced in the streets of Philadelphia. ATVs and dirt bikes. Should the city do more to enforce laws making it illegal to operate an ATV or dirt bike in Philadelphia? And over 80% of you believe that yes, more action needs to be taken to curtail this.
Yeah. And
So,
if I can, I'm sorry.
Oh yes, go ahead, Ray.
Yeah, if I can jump in, I'd like to remind folks that one of the fatalities, I believe, was the April 18th, the day of the 3 incidents. That was and it wasn't a kid; it was a young man, 25 years old, illegally operating a dirt bike on Henry Avenue. And again, there is everyone can go to the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania Department of Transportation and look this up. The Commonwealth of Pennsylvania has outlawed the use of these vehicles on all city streets. And it's a very well-prepared website which clearly outlines what you can and where you may not operate these vehicles. So, and also the law is also, particularly the irony is the law was written and put into place to protect the operators of those vehicles. Those vehicles, the riders ride low. They're out of sight lines of large vehicles like trucks and buses and SUVs. And yes, it was a SUV who rammed into this young man. So everyone's life is placed at risk by the illegal operation of these vehicles. And I think we need to throw out all ambiguities associated with it and look at it as a problem that needs to be dealt with. As we can see, the folks of our community are overwhelming in the majority of, yes, that law needs to be enforced.
So I'm going to ask Ray to stop sharing his screen, if only that way we can see more of each other. I want to share a couple more things. In the survey, there was a space allotted for people to put comments. We had an extraordinary amount of comments, far more than I will share tonight. But I will mention one thing that we haven't really talked about yet, and maybe an oversight we made when we invited sort of our guests to be part of this, is that a lot of people talked about enforcement. So, you know, that is an issue that I'm not sure how much anyone on this call will be able to talk about, but a lot of people talked about there's not a lot we can do about enforcement. And I am the only other comment that I wanted to share, and it's completely out of self-interest, as a reminder to the members of the community that of why we have East Falls Community Council. Somebody said, and it wasn't me, I swear, because I don't think I actually answered the survey, this is one of the most important issues facing the neighborhood, and I'm very glad to see it addressed by EFCC. I think it's got to be a very important issue because at this moment we have really like 3 times as many people on this call as we've had for several months on our calls. So I thank you all for being here. I've got some raised hands and some comments. Somebody did ask a question about our data and whether or not it looked at, does the data allow you to analyze safety felt with going to destinations by where in East Falls respondents live? It doesn't. That's something that maybe could be looked at a future traffic study, but we're not able to kind of spell that out from this. Somebody asked about using speed cameras to ticket, which I think really goes to that topic of enforcement. It would be safer than having police try to pull speeders over. Aren't cameras already used on Henry Avenue for red light violations? So I'm going to let maybe some folks from PennDOT and the Streets Department kind of talk about that. And
Emily, if I can just interject just very briefly, I like to be able to, at some point on our website, post the results of some good studies on the efficacy of speed cameras. From what I've seen, the data is literally all over the place, from 17% efficacy to 70% efficacy. So I really think that reflects a differential based upon where they're used. Let's say on an expressway or a busy arterial, and there's a lot of factors that probably go into it. One thing of concern that should be concerned, especially to those volunteers from Pennsylvania Horticultural Society, is that in some places, in order to put these speed cameras, they're going to have to either shear back tree canopy or remove street trees altogether. So that is something to be taken into consideration, because there is a very wonderful effort on the part of PHS to reline our streets with street trees, and as a member of the East Falls Tree Tenders, I could not support any effort that would do that. Take into consideration, it's another piece of street furniture, and Henry Avenue has been cluttered tremendously with street furniture. By that I mean all kinds of devices in an attempt to compel people to drive down, including the flashing lights that bookend the 3900 block of Henry Avenue, as well as all the large highway grade directional arrows, several of which have been plowed down by folks exceeding the speed limit and other things. So many things need to be taken into consideration.
Excuse me,
Wait,
can I say some more quick?
Yeah, can you hold on just one moment, because there's some other people. Samantha, you had your hand up from the councilman's office. Well, did you have a comment you wanted to make?
I didn't have my hand up. If I did, it was an accident.
Okay, sorry.
Sorry.
All right. There's also a couple things, if folks are paying attention in the chat. The city has outlawed ATVs on the street as of last week, this week. So let's see how this makes a difference. There are questions as to why we're now seeing major trucks going down Scotts Lane and Indian Queen Lane, and I want to see if maybe any folks on our panel might have some thoughts about that.